So we are now live streaming, and now over to you.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Well, welcome back, team. Had enough time to grab a toasted hot cross bun. I won't tell you where I got them from, but it was pretty good, and a hot drink. So hope you've managed to grab a bite yourselves. We're going to get back into it. Just had a bit of a chat with Mark offline around a couple of little bits we can do to improve things. Mark's going to now, just lost my page there. Page 60 to 65, I think you said, Mark, aren't we getting back into? And and we'll just try and give you the range that we're in, so you know where you can keep your questions to. So community services on page 60. Mark, who have we got there? Councillor Holbrook, have you got a question before we even get into it? Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, could I just remind to have the page numbers of the document as well, please? I'm also working off the online agenda. Thanks.
Sure, my apologies. That's 29 of the document, page 60 of the digital version. And so just over to the relevant staff member to talk us through community services.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll hand over to Mike, but I think we'll probably play it the same way Sean did, take it as read, and just move to questions on any subject matter from pages 60 to 65. It's the community services suite of activities.
Thank you. Mike, feel free to raise any highlights or lowlights you want to, otherwise we'll just move through to questions.
Sure, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, and good morning, councillors. Just a couple of things. As you can see from the stats, our libraries and pools businesses have been severely affected by COVID this year. That's not really a surprise, and that flows through into the statistics. Also, just a reminder, during the quarter in question, we did have some reasonably severe flooding around the district, which impacted on our cycleways, walkways and bridleways in particular. Those have now largely been addressed or are being addressed. And we did have a couple of minor issues with gaps in between staff roles being filled during the quarter, which we have now addressed, and that actually flows through into some of the commentary as well. But that's all from me. Thanks, Mr. Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mike. I was opening it up for questions. All right, looks like you're off the hook. Oh no, Councillor Halliday.
Yeah, nearly. Look, nothing too major from my end. Page 60 or 29 in the report, Otorera Park. I note that they've done the high-end plans around that. I think last time we had one of these, I asked whether it was possible to get either the community board or myself involved in that, since it's in our ward, but we just haven't had anything back around that. And I was just wondering perhaps whether the high-end plan could perhaps be sent out to the community board so they've got an understanding what's going on in that space.
I can do that, Mr. Chair. The next phase is of course, heavily involves stakeholder engagement, so I can make sure of that. Thank you.
Appreciate that. On page 65 or 34 of the report, I just noticed on the graph there, let's give you a chance to get to it, on the capital expenditure side of things, we had a drop from what was budgeted. We're now forecasting a decrease. Is that just a movement of time frames as such, or is that budget actually being decreased?
It's just phasing. I think, Mark, you'll agree with me. It's just phasing, Councillor.
Sweet. Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Page 65 again, 34. Look, it's around the older person's housing. I note that there is a 97% occupancy with regards to what's available. First question was, I was just curious to know why it's not 100% as such. Yeah, because I know that the demand's there. And the second, oh no, I've got another question after that.
That, Mike, just before we jump into it, Councillor, I think that question comes up almost every time we have it, and generally it's due to the refurbishment. I think it's referred to as decant provisions in the paper. But Mike, through to you.
That's correct. Each year we take about 6 units offline to be refurbed, and that's exactly why it's 3% below 100, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I thought you'd already allowed for that in your report. I thought that had already been taken out.
I will double check for you.
Yep. Are we currently, sorry, bear with me for a second here. Also, I just wanted to know, you're referring to the amount of housing that was available to be used. And I was just curious to know, I don't need to know that right now, just how many houses are currently out of circulation. If they could be afforded, would be much appreciated. Just get an understanding on how that's all going. But just wondering how the have the refurbishments themselves been held up by the general availability of the contractors and supplies?
Stuff that's in train is okay. We had the foresight to buy some jib in, and we have a small stock of that. So the units that are currently being refurbished will be okay. It is really next year that we're worried about.
Lovely. I might take this offline with you, Mike. That's great. Thank you very much.
It might have been the chief executive's first attempt at some trading with the jib purchase there, Mike. I heard it's going for some fairly significant dollars now.
We're holding on to it tight. I mean, not to say it's right.
Thank you, team. Look, I think that's all for you, Mike. We'll move on to the, I'm just double checking. I can't see any other hands up. So, Mark.
So through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. We'll now move to the activities which fall under partnerships. Council agenda, that's pages 66 to 73. And for those of you that don't have the agenda, it's report page 35 to 42. And Janice will be in support to answer any questions.
I'm happy to take these sections of the report as read. There's no specific highlights to raise really, other than to note that across several of the activities that are included in this report, we do expect to see some ongoing challenges around capacity as a result of the quite lumpy COVID environment. So certainly in terms of any of the work that we have council staff responsible for in our community support area, but also I think we're sensitive to the very real capacity challenges with, for our mana whenua partners at the moment, with all three of our iwi partners actively involved in community response activities around COVID. So other than that, nothing specific to highlight, that I do anticipate, and I'm happy to respond to some questions around the legislative non-compliance matter that we addressed earlier in the meeting.
Thank you, Janice. I'm assuming it's probably for everyone and not just for me. There's a bit of crackle or feedback coming through your speaker microphone. So, Councillor Halliday, first up.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. And one question here, but it's around economic development and to do with Te Urahi, actually. I appreciate we've been having the work done on the Te Tuku stream, and I'm under the impression, or we've been told that due to the walls of the stream not being available, that's basically been put on hold. I was just curious, it's not really a very long project. I was very surprised to hear that. I would have thought that the contractor might have secured those materials before they started this, rather than sort of wait till halfway through as such, especially with the market the way it is. Has that caused any sort of, I know it's caused problems, so is that going to cause us budget blowout as such? No, not, sorry, I shouldn't say budget blowout. I know there's quite a contingency there, an increase for those particular products.
I can answer that, Mr. Chair. And yes, certainly you would have expected the contractor to procure all of the materials there, but they had an issue. There was a shortfall basically in terms of the timber lagging, so the H6 timber lagging on the side of that channel. They were short in terms of their original order. So, so even though we did have a delay in terms of starting that work, because of securing that timber, they didn't quite secure enough. So I think they're starting back on site this week or early next week. So they've got more material, so they'll be getting back in there and looking to finish it. April, I think, is the finish date now for the stream works. And yes, that work has will cost more. I think I mentioned at the last update, because of the storm events we had. I think we had 2 or 3 events through there that basically meant they had to re-establish themselves twice back on site. So that's going to impact on the cost. And the original program they had there, they used concrete blocks, I think, to divert the stream. That wasn't effective enough, so they had to go to sheet piling. So there's a conversation at the moment about variation associated with that.
Cool, lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Compton.
Thank you. Through the chair, just following up from Councillor Halliday's question, I'm just curious as to why Te Uruhi isn't listed as having any challenges in this, given it's up, I appreciate that it's up to the 30th of December, but looking back at our emails, we got an update on the 6th, I think it's the 16th of December, which already sort of cited that the original completion date of that first stage, which was December, had been pushed back to March. And obviously since then, we know it's been possibly pushed back further. So I guess my question is, why hasn't that been listed as a challenge in the project? While it might not affect potentially might not affect the overall completion date, there's obviously been some delays in there that I thought would have warranted it being listed as a challenge, given that other, I guess, you look through the rest of the report and there's other, I guess, less significant issues that have been listed as challenges for other projects.
Can I just ask a question of Mark before we go to the answer? And I think it's a valid question, Gwyn, so I'm not cutting that off. And as Gwyn asked that, I flicked through and not all the categories have a title for challenges. So are they just added in there where there's deemed to be one? Or is it something moving forward, Mark, that it should be, under each one, even if there is challenges, there are none identified as a response? So maybe as a takeaway for you just to consider, Mark, around the layout or the reporting. I think I'm not too sure who is responding to that, whether it's Sean or not. So in terms of the specific question, over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I can see Jo's put her hand up, so I think she's wanting to provide a response, and I can chip in if needed. So, Jo, I think the question from the chair is, some activities have challenges and some don't. What is our criteria to include or not?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. The opportunity was given to provide challenges for each activity. In some cases they're provided, in some cases not. So, yeah, that's basically how it's ended up like that.
Yeah, I think I might elaborate on that potentially. So, Mr. Chair, so Councillor Compton, yeah, I apologise. That must just be an oversight because the new format to the report itself, as you've mentioned, yes, absolutely, there have been both the weather, materials, resourcing. There are challenges that we're dealing with there on that project. And again, as you've mentioned, it extends over 2 financial years. So timeframe we may be able to recover some of that time, but yeah, so we'll reflect on that and make sure that comes back as part of the next update.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gwyn. So Mark, again, do you think it would be helpful if we just had that challenges listed in there, and if there is none, it's just that actually noted that there is none?
Yes, certainly, Mr. Chair. We can certainly make that change for the Q3 report and going forward.
Thank you. I don't see any further hands up for this particular category. Are we all good, team? Right, no, don't see any further up. So we are now on page 70.
Thank you.
Sorry, back to you, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving forward, you're correct. We are now moving to page 74 of the council agenda. This is the activities that fall under planning and regulatory. That's council agendas page 74 to 80. And the report itself is pages 43 to 49. And we'll hand over to Mr. Jefferson.
Or if there are questions arising, possibly Natasha can deal with the district plan ones. But Mr. Chairman, thank you. Good morning, everyone. It is still morning. And good morning, Mr. Mayor and councillors. So Natasha and I will tag team on this, and I'll switch my mic off because I'm hearing feedback as well. So just take this bit as read. I will highlight some matters when we come to the regulatory services bit.
All right, any response from Natasha, or are we moving straight to questions?
No, I'm just happy to take any questions if there are any.
I'll kick it off with on page 78, page 47 of the document, there is around the customer journey mapping. And the key part that I'm interested in is the insights, and also that some of them have been quite an honest response here, and that's been challenging and nonetheless valuable. I wondered whether staff could elaborate a bit further on that piece of work and what's happened there and what's been gleaned from it. It's quite interesting. I mean, it's great that you've done it. Just really interested to hear in the key highlights of that piece of work.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'll tackle that. That's one that Regulatory Services embarked on in this reporting time, and we brought a contractor in to do those interviews, the surveys, and the detailed step-by-step journeys. What has been challenging for staff has been some of the feedback that we've received around our processes and whether the processes that belong to KCDC or are statutory processes imposed on us. Nonetheless, some of the feedback was a little bit challenging. It was never personal, but it was confrontational. One of the things that I was really pleased with was how the team responded to that and lived with the discomfort and went, so how do we improve? The key improvement areas are around the quality of information coming in and applications, and a number of you will be aware that this has been something we've been struggling with, as most other councils have been around the country. And it was interesting, I came back from leave on Monday and had a look. MB did a regional facilitation last week of building managers around the region, and one of the key learnings for them and one of their strategies is to help council get it right first time, which is a term I've been using for some time. The amount of rework out of poor quality applications causes everyone and puts the system under strain. That I think is indicative of systemic issues right across the development sector, and consultants are putting in applications of a poor quality, either because they're time constrained or in fact they haven't been able to keep up with legislative change. So there's work for us to be able to do in that space. How do we keep the local consultants and industry informed of those changes? How do we bring central government closer to the coalface, if you like? And that is a major struggle. But this customer journey mapping has greatly informed the group strategy for the next 18 to 24 months. And it is around all of those things that we have influence and control over, which is refresh of the website, FAQs, giving mum and dad developers who have no idea how to navigate the system some guidance or some direction. So those are the things that we'll embark on. And these are the really wonderful insights out of, at times, confrontational feedback from the development community. And as I say, it was never personal, but it's hard to see it when it's written down. It takes me back to my old police days when you talk to an offender and he's happy to chat to you, but when he saw it in black and white in a statement, he or she was reluctant to sign. So when it's written down, it's a little bit more confronting, but I'm really pleased with how the teams have responded to that. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you. That does. Appreciate the response. Councillor Holbrook and then Councillor McCann.
Yeah, thanks for that, James. We'll understand how some of those staff feel having read through some of the items in the customer satisfaction survey today. My question is around page 45, which is the not achieved residents who agree that the district is developing in a way that takes into account its unique character and natural environment. And it's just around the comment again. And the comment just says, we consulted on our draft approach to growth. So it's not clear whether that was our way of addressing that problem and whether we feel that's been addressed through that, or whether that was when the residents said that. Just, I mean, we might know that, but it's just a little bit, I think a little bit more detail around that might be good.
Certainly, look, I'm happy to talk to that. That comment is really, I guess, indicative that of something that was going on at the time, which might have influenced some of the residents' opinions at the time. That clearly, from the feedback there were a range of views. Some of our residents are concerned about growth in the district and what the impact of that might be, and that's, I guess, something that was potentially what was influencing those results there.
Yeah, thank you. That clarifies that nicely. So we're not up to page 49, are we yet, of the resource consent times?
I'm happy if you want to go there. Probably your call, Mr. Chair, but I'm happy to take a question, Councillor.
It is, yeah, it is within the range of pages we're talking about, so far ahead.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think that's great that we've got that journey mapping underway, and that's really useful. I'm just looking at the a result that wasn't achieved about the average working days to process non-notified resource consents, and just noting that's 23.5 above our expected timeframe, which is 17. Just wondering, are we allocating extra resourcing through the annual plan to this to make sure we have the resources that we require? And or is it just really hard to find those resources anyway, no matter kind of how many dollars you throw at?
Yeah, look, thank you through the chair. One that's exercised us for a while. One of the lowlights in this period that I was going to give an overview of was the resource consent team in particular took a real hammering in October and November last year, where, as you'll see, the commentary said there was a significant increase in the number of applications that we received, coupled with the rework that we're doing that I alluded to earlier in terms of the poor quality of some of those applications. But more importantly, the team just the planets aligned badly. There was a lot of sick leave, there was parental leave, there was bereavement leave with the staff member who had to travel overseas, and one of the senior staff members. So there was a huge hole in that resource consents team, as well as getting a couple of new graduate planners in. So we had bums on seats, but in terms of their productivity and their ability to deal with some of the, so it was the perfect storm. And one of the positives from that was I was thrilled with how the team that were left standing during that period responded, and they prioritized and reprioritized. But more importantly, from a local perspective, they communicated really clearly and openly and honestly with the developers and their consultants about timeliness, and that was met really well. A number of developers have said to me, look, James, we don't care whether it's 17 or 20 or 23 working days, as long as we know where it's at and it's progressing, and we're not doing this iterative shuffling of papers just to be seen to actually put it on hold, just to gather more time. So I was pleased with that. Second part of your question, yes, we've done a resourcing piece of work, as I had indicated many months, I think, so it seems like a long time ago, and we have new staff in the pipeline, both for building and resource consents. As a first tranche of work, we'll need to look at as we grow Jackie's environmental standards team, but certainly critical that we get additional resource in for resource consents and building, and we're about to go to market with a bit of a recruitment campaign. It's incredibly, as the commentary, as VJ has put in the commentary there, an incredibly difficult market. We're competing with Kying Ore for building offices. They're paying significantly more than we can, and same too, the consultancies are picking up planners. But interesting, we see that starting to change a little. I'm encouraged that we will be able to attract and retain some good staff. So watch this space.
Thanks, James. That's a really good response, and certainly this is being identified across the region. At the last regional leadership group meeting, certainly it was this struggle to find staff and resources certainly is not unique to us. So thank you very much.
Councillor McCann.
Oh, look, thank you, James. Councillor Holbrook, I think, has effectively covered my questions regarding building consents, but both Councillor Compton and I have raised a number of opportunities whether we need more resources within your budget to be able to deal with the onslaught of regulations and requirements. Is that, do you still hold to the previous positions that you don't need further resources from an annual plan or that kind of thing?
No, not at all. Look, I think there's two prongs to our attack. If we reduce the noise, and you and I have talked about that offline, if we reduce the noise and the repeat information, information requests that we're having to do, that will get us some traction. But we have done a piece of work internally, and what will fall into the annual plan process for next year is the embedding of 12 positions. I'm trying to think the split on that. 3 or 4 of those will be fixed term to help us do the website update, FAQs, those sorts of things. But I think 5 in building and 3 or 4 in resource consents, just to manage that work as part of the business case that we did to SLT. The consultant that I brought in to do that piece of work for us showed us that we're operating in those 2 areas. We're operating at about 130% of capacity, and we're managing that capacity by sending work out to consultants who themselves are constrained in both RC and BC space. And of course, the important part from a staff wellbeing perspective is the discretionary stuff like training and professional development is what gets lost out of that 130% of capacity. So look, we are going out to recruit, and they'll be formally embedded in the new annual plan, and there'll be sufficient. There's more than sufficient revenue to cover those costs, but most importantly, getting that resource in to do some of that tidy up, I think will help reduce the noise as well. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Got one further question. Thank you, James. I think it does. And it's really good to hear, if I'm allowed to make a comment, that you are trying to look after those staff and their well-being, because it is incredibly stressful. The second part, or second question I have, is regarding the customer journey mapping. Obviously, that also intersects with our housing program. Will there be an opportunity to actually sit down and discuss some of the information within the report, whether that's with the full council or whether with the portfolio holder?
Through the chair, look, I am happy to do that, and I think there would be value in bringing Gina, who was the consultant that ran that work, her and my management team, doing a bit of a workshop with you or a briefing, and actually have the customer journey maps up around. I don't know how we do it virtually, but my thought was put them up around chambers, have you walk through them, have one of the managers talk you through each of those journey maps. They really are incredibly valuable, but I'd like see how we could wrangle it virtually, and that might be quite doable, but happy to look at that and take you through that, either as a portfolio or the wider group of councillors. More than happy to do that.
Thank you. Can I make one final comment, James? Mr. Chair?
Yeah, look, if you can keep it brief, because I know that a number of councillors have been making comments, so...
Yeah, thank you, James. Very fulsome answers, and it just reminds me how we need to make sure that we're taking the public on this journey. You would have seen the results from sort of a satisfaction survey regarding what we're doing in the housing, which probably just points to the issues we're facing. So I think it's really important that we continue keeping the public informed about the journey we're taking, because I think it's really significant work that staff are doing. Thank you, James. Both Jameses.
Thanks, Rob. Look, before we move to Martin and then Halliday and Councillor Elliott, Mr. Jefferson, I can't remember whether it was in a formal meeting. I think it was, but I certainly recall in the past that you had alluded to doing a piece of work around evaluating what the need was. So as a businessman, what I respect out of that is that you don't just simply say, look, we need another 2 or 3 staff, that you actually were embarking on a piece of work to look at where the pressure was and what the actual need was, rather than putting up a bid to the annual plan for, like I said, just 2 or 3 staff. So that's the piece of work that you were referring to in response to Councillor McCann, and that you now have satisfactory budget within this year's annual plan to fulfil the findings from that review?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chair. Given the volumes and given us getting our charging regime more in line with our revenue and financing policy, money, famous last words, money is not an issue. And I think it's been a robust piece of work that was done. It took a little bit longer than I would have liked, but certainly signed off by SLT, and we just need to go out and recruit and get on with it now.
Thanks, James. So over to Councillor Halliday and then Councillor Elliott.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Look, I did have some questions around the journey mapping, but I'll endorse Councillor McCann's and Mr. Jefferson's response regards to having a workshop or something around that. So I'll just reserve my comments for then and bring them in through that, if that's right.
Thanks, Councillor. That's helpful. Councillor Elliott.
Oh, just really briefly, James, you're talking about the 12 new positions and planning for this annual plan or next year?
Sorry, we clicked on the wrong tab, struggled to find my mute button. So through the chair. Look, effectively, I'd like to go out to market very, very soon.
Okay.
And we're working with HR, but ultimately they'll be embedded. Some of them are fixed term contracts because we don't know what the future holds in terms of some of them are 3-year fixed term contracts, and that will take us through to hopefully getting greater clarity around future of local government and see whether this growth phase continues. So we've tried to be mindful, not to put any fat in the system. This is the bare minimum. Does that help?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
All right, team. I don't see further hands up, so we're going to move on to the next section. Mark, if you want to just kick it off again.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of the agenda, it's the corporate activity, agenda pages 81 to 82, report pages 50 to 51. I'll just give everyone a few seconds to get there, and I'll kick it off, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mark.
So just in terms of the long-term plan, actually formalised the corporate activity. The functions that sit within the corporate activity we've always had, but we haven't actually formalised and reported on the corporate activity. So this is the first time we have. So instead of taking it as read, I'll talk a little bit to it. It's a very busy activity, and it's been doing lots of big things. To mention just a few, it's responding to the over 700 submissions that we had on the long-term plan. These things need to be closed out. Submitters do expect responses to their submissions. There was the annual report, was our response to COVID. Obviously working with the business on recruitment and many other things. So there is one performance measure in the corporate activity, and that is that we do an annual staff engagement survey, and one of the questions that we ask staff is that they have tools and materials to be able to do their job right. And the performance measure is that we improve on the score from the previous year. So you'll see that we actually this performance measure was not achieved. In 2020, the score out of 5 was 3.96, which is a very high score. And in 2021, the score was 3.96. So it was exactly the same as the year before. So if we're going to be pure, that performance measure, there needs to be improvement. So it wasn't achieved. Saying that, it's a high score, and we're doing lots of work with the organisation, particularly in the IT space, to make sure that people can work from home, they're constantly connected, they have the right tools to do the job. So it was disappointing to still be on 3.96. I still believe that as an organisation, we're very well positioned to have staff working remotely. The connectivity to the organisation is very, very high. The Microsoft 365 suite that we've deployed, the equipment that we've deployed, people can pretty much work anywhere they like. They can access all of our systems from anywhere on any device. But it's always an area for improvement, and we will continue to work hard on that space, and we're starting to look at moving some of our systems to the cloud to increase connectivity and flexibility. So it's something we look at all the time. But so disappointing, we have to record that we haven't achieved that performance measure, but as an organisation, we're performing very well in that space. So thank you, Mr. Chair. That's my intro. I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Mark. Any questions, team? Councillor Halliday.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Look, just wanted to say, Mark, I just wanted to congratulate you and your team and everybody else on the report structure as such. I found it really, really easy to read, and yeah, absolutely fantastic. Yeah, very, very clear. Just got to get my head around how the financials are set out again, but I'm sure I'll be there for the next one as such. Look, I actually had one question. It was just around the capital budget on page 82 or 51 of the report, and I just note that on the capex side of it, the actual budget's gone up, or the budget requirement for the year has gone up in the forecast. I appreciate the operational cost side of things with regards to what you're talking to, but the capex side of things, I was just wondering what that was on.
Yeah. So, Councillor, through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor, thank you for your positive feedback. It's been a labour of love, this new report, and as I said at the start, look, it's a giant leap in the journey to get better. So we've had some really good feedback today. But thank you for your positive feedback, and I'll certainly let the team know. Just in terms of the budget, in terms of the corporate activity, we have we've actually just moved some budget pertaining to land purchases. That's been moved into the corporate activity. It aligns better with our strategic land purchases. So the budget actually sits somewhere else. So we're still forecasting to spend within budget, but we've better aligned what we do back into the corporate. So next, when we do the annual plan, we'll move the budget from planning and regulatory into corporate.
Lovely, thank you.
Thanks, Martin. I don't see any further questions in this category. So, Mark, if you want to go to the next one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move us to the financial management section of the report, and I know Ian is eagerly awaiting to respond to questions.
All right, so there's no, he's already spoken to this at the start. We'll just move straight into questions. Councillor Holborough and then Councillor Halliday.
Yes, my question before the meeting was around the operating surplus for the half year, but that was really well explained verbally. I just wonder if that could be made just a little bit more clear in the statements in the report going forward. So it was certainly a lot clearer to me this morning than it was when I read the agenda. Just assuming that's, that for the full year forecast, that's $4.1 million lower than budget, not $40 million.
Sorry, Councillor, which page is this?
Sorry, page 53 of the report itself. I don't have an agenda page. That's the operating list.
Sorry, I'm not quite following the point. It sounds like we've got an error in the commentary.
Yeah, I mean, I can take it offline, but yeah.
I can answer that. Through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor. No, it's not a typo. It is $41 million, and it relates to the. We had assumed that State Highway 1 would be revoked to council this financial year. So we recognise that in the financial statements as vested income, and so we aren't going to be getting that. So we will be lower by $41 million.
Oh, that's great. Good explanation. I wonder if that kind of thing could be pulled out, because it does seem anomalous for the 2.7 for the half year and then 41 million for the end of the year. In terms of the financial position, just a brief comment that the last compliance report went through audit and risk with some very positive comments. So I just wanted to bring that.
Thank you, Janet. Councillor Halliday.
I did have a couple of things, Mark, and nothing too major at all. Page 50, sorry, page 87, 56 on the report. Sorry, I'll just get it myself. I was just looking at the state highway revocation. The budget has doubled for that, from 1 million to about 2.2. I appreciate the transport hub separate, and I appreciate there would have been an increase in that with regards to land purchases as such. I was just curious to know about that increase in forecast end of year budget.
Could I ask Sean to respond to that if he's still there? Hello, Sean.
Perhaps he's not.
Okay. Look, sorry, I don't have that level of detail, but happy to follow up after the meeting.
Absolutely fine. Thank you, Ian. Another question. I've only got two more. Page 91 I've got here. Yes, look, thank you for splitting out the personnel cost. Much appreciated. I did notice. But I was just curious to know, we're using a lot of contractors at the moment with regards to staff shortages and things. And I was wondering whereabouts in our expense that's picked up. Is that picked up as part of that expense, as a personnel cost, or is it picked up somewhere else?
It is netted into that personnel line. So if you have a look at, we account for it as a separate line item in behind that. And you'll see if you go down to that level of detail that we are well underspent on permanent staff.
Yes.
And offset by over expenditure against, as you say, fixed term contractors, etc.
Okay, all right, lovely, thank you. Another one was and just this might be how I perceive things. It was actually an issue around how a positive and a negative showing up, and I just wanted to make a comparison. Just bear with me for a second, sorry. On page 91, which is obviously this one here, from a profit and loss perspective, we've got our losses or our negatives in brackets, which is minimal standard practice. But if I refer up to pages 86, 87, 86 and 87, that's not the case. The brackets are in the positives. And I appreciate that it might be a different figure against what is budgeted versus actual. But I found that quite confusing because to take a point, I guess, major stormwater projects, third line, fourth line down, we've got a budget of 2254, but we've gone above that. And that almost shows me as that as a negative. I appreciate that it's more than likely an expense in relation to an additional expense, but I did find that a little bit confusing. Or is that standard practice in that area?
So can I ask for the page reference on the document, please?
On the document, 55.
55.
Yeah, Councillor, what you've highlighted is, look, generally what you've highlighted is, I think, is a slight oversight, particularly on that one item. That certainly shouldn't be like that. That's just, I think, an error. But look, brackets are always used to depict an unfavourable variance.
Yeah.
That particular one, I think we're forecasting to be under budget, and it's in a bracket, so that bracket shouldn't be there. Well spotted. It got through us.
Yeah, I'll just like that for the general page. I'm sure it's just that's cool. I was just checking it wasn't me as such. And
no. You highlighted a little error in the 78-page report. So we'll the brackets should.
Mark, that's not correct. It is an overspend. Mark, it is an overspend. There's no error there. Okay,
it's over.
Year to date, we're 500 over, so it is
that's
correct.
Right, yeah. So that's normally how that's depicted in that sort of report, that particular page report.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. I just wasn't too sure. That was all. I was just getting. I find sometimes council reports differ slightly with regards to what I would consider normal business reports from a business perspective. So as long as I'm aware of what that is, that was just clarifying that. And if possible, just a bit of admin. If it's possible, get a delineated line between the quarterly report and the end of year forecast, just helps tidy that one up a little bit as well. From my perspective, you may or may not take that on board. Thank you very much.
Noted. Thank you. And apologies for being delayed in responding to your questions. I'm struggling with page numbers a bit. Apologies.
That's right.
Sorry, we got there in the end. And just as the Chief Executive has clarified, that figure was actually over, I think, I hope I'm not muddying the water there, but that's certainly how I saw in terms of the spend, in terms of actual and budget. So, Mark, I think we're done now. I don't think there's any further questions on the financial sector. Ian, thank you for your help walking us through and answering those questions that were there. I don't think we've got anything further, Mark, in this particular one. Go back to the recommendations. Yes, we've had a good discussion around the residents' opinion survey, looking to slot in a workshop to delve into that a bit deeper. Recommendations?
Mr. Chair, we have Councillor Randall who would have a question.
Oh, Councillor Randall, last question.
No, we haven't discussed corporate performance about the Official Information Act. You said you were going to raise it later.
Sorry, I'd left it for you to raise later, but given that it was missed, given that it was missed, and I am not reneging on that offer, we haven't put the motion, so you are welcome to ask that question, Bernie. Just if you could just note the page number for everybody.
It's on page. Well, I'm looking at the KCDC website, page 71.
Thank you, Bernie.
Now, who do I address the question to? Which staff member am I?
Well, look, just put the question, and then the relevant staff member can respond.
Okay. It appears that this council says official information requests are responded to within 20 working days. And they seem to be treating it as if there are the email or the letter that comes forward mentions official information. But my understanding is Section 12 of the Official Information Act says, it doesn't have to be the word official information mentioned when asking a council staff a question. They still should be responding within 20 working days. And it's an important issue. I raised it about 5 years ago with the Ombudsman, and he agreed with me, but I don't know if there's any controversy about this matter.
I've certainly seen examples of myself where an email has been sent and staff have responded saying, we will treat this as an official information request. So they're not specifically requiring people to ask that, but I'll hand it over to staff to respond. Bernie?
Thank you.
So yes, that's correct, that any request for information made to the council, irrespective of whether the requester references the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act or not, is considered as a request for information, and the provisions of the GOIMA apply. There are times when we respond to very straightforward requests quite quickly, and then there are other times when we identify that for a range of reasons that information request should be put through our GOIMA process, which has additional tracking and other features to that process. But I'm not entirely sure what your question was, Councillor Randall. Sorry, perhaps if there's more you would like, you can clarify.
Bernie, if I heard you correctly, it was and I'll come back to you just to clarify, but you are stating that requesters don't have to state the fact that it is an official request. Am I right on that?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
So I guess just to clarify, we have a GOIMA policy that has recently been adopted and are about to work with the Office of the Ombudsman on some training for staff as part of implementing that policy. And as part of that training, we'll be looking to grow the organisation's understanding and practice of the requirements of the GOIMA and how it relates to a range of inquiries across the business.
Thanks, Janice. Bernie, I take it that was all that you had on that particular one. I can go to Councillor Pravanov now.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just following up on Councillor Randall's question. So when, I suppose, councillors and members of the public put in questions, I suppose people do this in the expectation of a question. Are all questions that are not answered actually, because I think some questions may be not answered, and are they actually captured under the Information Act request process, or what happens to them?
Sorry, just taking my headphones off because I understand, but I'm still a little bit crackly. So apologies, you're going to hear the neighbours' renovations in the background potentially. We have a tracking process for any inquiries or requests for information that are put formally through our GOIMA process. There are a range of other ways that requests for information could come into the business, either via our service request system, via an email, or other type of communication directly to staff. And at the moment, there isn't one central place for tracking all of those very, different types of requests. But that's certainly a piece of work that we'll be taking a look at within the governance and legal services team in the coming year.
And Jocelyn, from my own experience, even as an elected member, I've put in requests. I've asked questions specifically on a topic, and staff have come back saying that will be responded from the team that manages the official information requests. And on one occasion, further information was sought from staff to clarify the question that I had and so forth. So certainly in my experience, the question that you've asked is what I've experienced. And if there is any doubt over whether a question is answered or not, the team certainly went to the lengths to clarify that with me, and also closed it off by asking whether I felt that they had fully answered the questions that I'd raised. So that's at least been my experience. Did you have any further to ask, or?
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think if you've got a good relationship with staff, you don't have to go down that Official Information Act request process. But I suppose
Can I just clarify? It was staff's decision to respond to me through the official.
Yes.
Yeah.
I suppose every now and again I hear from members of the public where they've asked some questions and they've never got a response, or basically it's way outside that 20 working days. And I think I think it's important to look at some of those questions that come in, and particularly when they're not treated as Information Act requests, where they actually go.
So can I just clarify, because I do want to move the meeting on, but not to stifle the question that you've raised. What is the specific question? Are staff responding to all questions or requests from members of the public? I'm just trying to help staff in terms of responding.
Yes, it is. And are they tracked, please?
I think that's back to you, Janice.
Look, I'm going to have a go at answering that question, but I keep getting messages to say I have ongoing sound quality issues. So I'm happy to take the conversation offline as well. But I think I've previously indicated that there are a range of channels that requests for information could come in via, and there is no one single source of reporting across the timeliness of responses across all of those different channels. But that is a matter that we will be taking a look at.
And Janice, just to close it out, thanks, Jocelyn. My understanding is the Ombudsman, I think it's the Ombudsman, is taking a closer look at all councils across New Zealand. So I'm pleased to hear that you guys are working with them in terms of improving our practices. I think I saw a nod there. Yeah, great. Councillor Halliday.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. I just checking my notes. I had two very quick administrative things I just want to point out, which I'm right or wrong on. Page 36, or page 5 in the report. The beginning of the paragraph talks to our capital spend year to date against full-year budget. It's not tracking as favourably. It's not possible. It is possible that not all capital will be spent. Is that referring to our CapEx program? Is that meant to be referring to our CapEx program? Should that be worded differently to reflect that? Or is there some capital sitting somewhere that's not being spent as such?
I'll let Mark answer, but that's certainly my understanding. It's CapEx in terms of the Capital Works program. But Mark?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it is referring to the Capital Works program. Okay,
that's cool. And the other one was just on page 43. Where are we? Which is, sorry, page 12 of the report. The graphs you've got there refer to measures to 31st of December 2020. I was just checking that was correct, and it's not meant to be 2021.
Actually, it's meant to be 2021. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, no, that was it. I just thought it'd be easier to bring them up here rather than do an email. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Good spotting, Martin. All right, Councillor Pravanov, I see you're back again.
I am, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Look, it's 20 to 1. Can you, if you can
Yes.
just keep it to the question, helpful.
So I've actually just got one question. So my question relates to service requests and the timing around actually resolving those rather than just responding. And are they actually treated, how are they actually treated in relation to Information Act requests? And I suppose, some probably are and some aren't. How are they treated in terms of timeliness to resolve them rather than just respond to them?
I'll jump in here, but perhaps some of my colleagues might also have comments. Service requests are a request for service as opposed to a request for information, as would be covered under the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act. Sometimes we use our service request tracking system as a way of tracking inquiries that could be considered a request for information, but there are many types of requests that form the basis of our overall system around service requests. Different types of requests have different service levels attached to them and will be responded to and resolved within different timeframes depending on the type of service request that it is.
So are those timeframes depending on the priority available?
Timeframes are set within each activity and each service. I guess our ability to meet the timeframes or not depends on the availability of resource at the time the request comes in, but the service levels largely are set and are consistent and have been for quite some time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holbrook.
Yeah, just happy to move the recommendations as set out in council agendas.
Thank you. That's helpful. I don't see any further questions, and we've had a really good go at this report. I appreciate all the staff responses in providing the further information for elected members. Recommendations are found on page 28 of the report. Recommendation A and B, moved by Councillor Holbrook. Do we have someone that's happy to second it?
Got Councillor Elliott in the chat has said that she's happy to second.
Thank you, Jackie. Moved by Councillor Holbrook, seconded by Councillor Elliott. Right of introduction.
I'll be really brief because it is 20 to 1, though these reports used to go on much longer, and I just want to acknowledge the huge amount of work that's gone into redesigning this report. I think it's absolutely fantastic, really easy to follow, something that the public can really enjoy as well as us. So congratulations to Mr. De Haast and the team on this report today. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, and I Toko, thanks to staff and management. This is a really, really good report. This has been a really good, valuable conversation. I just want to discuss a comment made earlier in the day when we were doing the customer service satisfaction survey regarding this council currently performing better and doing more in the housing area. Yes, there are amazing things going on in the housing area, and thanks so much to the portfolio leader, utterly brilliant. But I do want to stick my hand up in support for those on previous councils and in previous community groups over the last 7 years that I know of, who have worked so hard and diligently against a brick wall, frankly, trying to get anything done in housing. But what did happen before this training started was that we finally got together enough to do the community task force on housing, which was a heck of an important guiding document through to the needs assessment and now to implementation. So I would just like to say kudos for everyone who is working in housing, social housing especially. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hanford.
Yeah, kia ora, just a super brief comment. Wana tautoko Jackie's comments, Councillor Elliott's comments, and also Councillor Holbrook's comments as well about the readability and how engaging I found the document to read. Although it was quite a few pages, I still found myself kind of getting through it relatively quickly. So I think that's that's good. And I just, wanted to provide that feedback that I think you've all done a great job and that I actually really enjoyed reading it. So I think I mentioned this before, but there are often little pages that you can kind of screenshot and go, here's what council does, or look at the amazing things that are on the work program. And, this is how things have been going over the last little while. So it's a really great tool to be able to communicate this stuff to our community, but also just was really easy to read and digest everything that is going on and everything that's to come. So thanks heaps.
Thanks, Sophie. Councillor McCann.
Kia ora. Just want to echo some of the comments of my fellow councillors. I think it's really important when we're asking searching questions that we acknowledge that we're doing that on the basis that this report is actually a really good piece of work, really, really helpful. And where we've asked for more detail, it's been great to hear that further meetings will be set up and we can traipse through some of those details. But well done to everyone. Thanks very much.
Look, and I'll don't see any other hands, so I'll just wrap up and then see if Councillor Holbrook has a right of reply. Mark, I think what you're hearing is that the document strikes the balance between having the information that we need as governors without having too much information that actually just bogs us down with 100-page reports, and makes it very clear and easy to read the highlights, while still opening up room for those further questions if the need arises, taking some things offline or into a workshop or a briefing. So, for example, the residents' opinion survey. I do know that elected members are keen to delve into some of the detail behind that residents' opinion survey. So I look forward to that date being set up where we can have a more sort of fulsome discussion around some of the rationale or the why behind some of that feedback and some of those scores. Because one, we don't want to brush it aside and just say that's just a national trend. But two, equally, we don't want to talk down the good aspects or the good performance that you've alluded to. There are a lot of things going well within the district. So we need to sort of go in and have a look at that sort of full package and look forward to that workshop when you guys can find time to fit it in. So, Councillor Holbrook, right of reply, it's waived. I'm going to put that to the vote. Councillors, if you can use your voting icons, green tick for yes. All those in favour? Those against?
Mr. Chair, we have 11 votes in favour.
Great work. Thanks, team. If you can remove those votes, and that's passed. So we're now going to move back to item number 8.2, which is the Major Event Fund Policy Update, found on page 13. Just mindful of time, team. As usual, as your chair, I'll always allow discussion and try and moderate that if needed. But we are late in the day. We've got, I think the next meeting is at 1:30. We have been through briefings on this topic, so I don't imagine there's anything curly, but I'm going to hand it over to staff and see how we go from there.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you. My name is Monica Turner and I work in the Economic Development team with Mark Ward and Darren Grant, and I've been working on the Major Event Fund. I'd just like to start by acknowledging Council and thank you for your participation in the process so far. Your feedback that you gave to us in the briefing in January has been incorporated into the paper that we're presenting to you today. We've also presented this to the Economic Development Kotahitanga Board, and they are supportive of the proposals that we're making today. So this revised policy is now very strongly aligned with the Destination Management Plan that you adopted last year. And the Destination Management Plan acknowledges that major events are a channel through which to promote the district. The key innovation that we've put into this, into the policy is the new innovation is the Strategic Growth Fund, which is strongly aligned with the Destination Management Plan. And through the DMP, we now have the key themes and target segments that we for the district, and we aim to choose events that align well with those themes and segments And that way we build, the goal is to build the destination brand and to build our identity that we can market to our visitors. So Darren, Mark and I are here today to take any questions that you have on the policy update. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. So quickly, elected members, just open it up for questions. Councillor McCann.
With your leave, Mr. Chair, I just want to say I've got no questions. I've been really impressed by the briefings and the development of this proposal.
Are you happy to move the recommendations if there's no further questions?
Very happy to.
Okay, I'll just see Councillor Halliday's got his hand up, so we'll tackle questions and then come back to you, Councillor. Councillor Halliday?
Look, just relatively brief. The funding that's available that we're working for at the moment, that's being issued, that's the leftover from this tranche of funding. Is that correct?
Sorry, I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, we've got a certain amount of funding that's we're putting out in March for applications for the fund.
Oh, right. No,
and,
so that's the new round of funding. So the last year, the entire allocation of 200,000 was given out in June and also again in December. And so the new one that's going out in March is the new fund, which will be dispersed in June.
Right. Okay, thank you. It's not how I read the report, but I can't exactly reference it right now. But that answers that question. Thank you.
Councillor Buswell.
I really just wanted to indicate that I'd second the recommendation. I have spoken to a couple of event organisers and they have also supported these recommendations, which is really good. And it also just goes to show how well connected our economic development team are now with our community of event organisers, and it also shows the support that that council have and also our staff personally with the support to the event organisers through this horrible COVID period, which has obviously impacted this industry significantly over the last couple of years. So thank you again to the staff for their ongoing support to these event holders. I'd like to second it.
Thanks, Ange. All right, look, I don't see any other hands up. So Councillor McCann has indicated he'd like to move the recommendations. Right of introduction, Councillor McCann.
I'll try and be brief because we are between this and dinner, but I think it's really important to acknowledge the tremendous work that's gone on here. So I totally support the repurposing of the feasibility fund shift, especially the flexibility between the major events tier 1 and 3. And I'd like to acknowledge again that council staff have taken on a lot of advice from the sector and from councillors, which is great. And it's really good to see the linkage between the destination plan and major events playing out. I'd like to acknowledge that there's still a gap for community events, but it's been decided that that there are better places to fill that gap. So it's really great to see that work is taking place, and I'm sure that will connect with the team. Also really good to see the link with Tangata Whenua, and it's really demonstrated within the funding rounds that we currently have. And also to acknowledge Councillor Buswell's comment, the great connection the team have with support for organisers and working with them. So all in all, this is a really good piece of work. Great to see it evolving the way it has been, and well done to the staff. Thanks.
All right, I don't see any further hands up for debate. Let's pause there for a couple of seconds. Nope. So is it a clap or a question, Councillor Halliday? That's a clap. Very good. So I'm going to put that to the vote, team. Monica, thank you for your help in assisting the elected members through the report. All those in favour say aye. Those against? Let's get DEM Services to count those votes.
We have 10 in favour. I'm just having a look to see if there's one that hasn't been communicated yet or whether we've lost anyone.
It's Councillor Buswell.
Councillor Buswell.
But she seconded the motion.
He seconded
yes.
it. All
No
right,
problem.
that's
We're at
passed.
11.
Thanks, Fiona. So just remove those voting tabs. I'm just going to get back to our order of business. That is passed. And again, thanks to the team. And if you could pass in our thanks to the ED team as well, Monica, in terms of the work that's gone into that through the briefings and with stakeholders and so forth.
Thank you.
So, team, that's all the reports we've managed to get through. Now moving on to confirmation of minutes on page 102. Councillor Randall, are you happy to move those? Thank you. Just checking, so we're not rushing through that. There is no questions out of that. If I don't see any hands, we've had it moved by Councillor Randall, just looking for someone to second it. Councillor Hanford, happy to second. So moved by Councillor Randall, seconded by Councillor Hanford. Minutes of the 10th of February be accepted as true and accurate. I'm going to put that to the vote. Those in favour? Against?
Mr. Chair, we have 11 in favour.
And minutes are passed. Thank you. Remove those votes. And public speaking time, I'm not aware of anyone to speak at the end of the meeting. And there is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, team, but we are done.
Do we have publicly excluded minutes?
Yep.
Yeah,
So we
sorry.
just move through to the recommendations for moving into public exclusion. Would someone like to move that? Councillor Holborough? Seconded by Councillor Halliday. Thank you. All those in favour to move into public exclusion? Give your vote. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we have 11 votes in favour.
Thank you. That's passed. And we'll now move into public exclusion and just allow a few seconds to staff get that sorted. And
Thank you. Just bear with me.